Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas Jr. are both ranked as top 12 overall fantasy players as they enter their second season. But is that too high, too low, or just right? We debate second-year player rankings on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy betting and the draft for sportingnews.com.
Today, we are going to discuss the consensus rankings for second-year players, and there are 6 guys heading into their second year that are all ranked as top 50 overall players heading into 2025 draft. So we're going to hit on those 6 guys. That's Malik Nabers, Brian Thomas Jr., Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey, Jayden Daniels, and Marvin Harrison Jr. But let's start with the top 2 guys here, and those are both Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas Jr., with Nabers being the highest of this bunch at 10th overall right now in consensus rankings, wide receiver 7, which is where he finished last year in average scoring. So what would you say about Nabers' ranking right now? Is it too high, too low, or just right? Would you move him up, down, or keep him where he is?
First of all, let me just say this. It's interesting that we're not going to be talking about any running backs. That's also kind of true of last year's draft class. And the other thing we're looking at here is the fact that this year's rookie class, that's why we're not as excited, is not going to give us this same type of results with so many fantasy scoring assets. So Nabers and Thomas are where it's at. So don't always be looking at, okay, who's the next Nabers and Thomas? Let's look at the actual Nabers and Thomas. Now, Michelle didn't love this Giants quarterback situation between Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. I'm on the fence about it. I just look at Malik Nabers as being kind of parallel to DeAndre Hopkins early in his career with all those Texans quarterbacks he went through. Last year, Malik Nabers got it done with Tommy DeVito and Drew Lock and some of these guys that they were trotting out there. Daniel Jones was a lame duck quarterback at that point. So, I mean, you look at Winston. I think Winston, we were okay, but I don't think he's going to win the battle. I think that he's going to stay as a backup here, and we're going to get Russell Wilson. Now, the question is, will they adjust Malik Nabers a little bit in the middle of the field so that Russell Wilson can throw to him a little bit more? I also know that Russell Wilson, I know he can be stubborn, but I think Malik Nabers is a little bit more malleable as an all-around receiver and more reliable than George Pickens was, right? He's not going to have those mercurial moments. He's going to be a pro, run those routes, get open here. So I think he's going to be okay, but this is very lofty, right? For anybody to duplicate this, it's hard. So we're playing Goldilocks here. So it's like, is it up, down, just right with Malik Nabers? I think it's a little bit up. I'm going to say a little bit up because, again, this quarterback situation, as Michelle said, if Wilson is going to be a bit stubborn, that's a concern. Will they get another key target? We're not sure in the draft. I don't think that's going to cut into what Malik Nabers does all that much. This team doesn't have a lot of vacated targets, by the way, so that doesn't really open it up for a lot more when we go with the Giants. So when we look at that, I think, look, wide receiver 7, it's very hard to duplicate those results. I still think he's a top 12 wide receiver. I think I'd rather take the next guy we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, it is really close. So technically, because I was thinking about how we're playing this game, is that would you move him up, down, or keep him at his ranking? So technically, you would like to move Nabers down.
I would say down. I would say down, a little bit down.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if we have a little bit increments in this game, but I'm going to say a little down.
I would too, because right now, I mean, you're deciding between him or AJ Brown or, you know, a Jonathan Taylor right next to like a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown. That seems a little rich with the concerns at quarterback. Like if we knew his quarterback situation was great, I mean, the sky's the limit for him. It's a little scary when you're thinking about Russell Wilson throwing him the ball and how much he refuses to go over the middle and how he is willing to spread the ball around. And there are other weapons here in Darius Slayton and Wan'Dale Robinson for Russell Wilson to spread it around. Now, if Shedeur Sanders gets drafted and wins the job, I actually would really like that for Nabers because I think a rookie would just pepper Nabers with targets. But you brought up you would prefer Brian Thomas Jr., you think, over Nabers in drafts. And right now he's sitting right behind him, going 11 overall and half-point PPR leagues. Wide receiver 8 off the board. He finished as the wide receiver 11 on average in his rookie season. But we know that second half of the year was just so great for Brian Thomas. So I'm guessing that you would like to move Brian Thomas Jr. up a couple spots.
Yeah, I would almost trade places. So do up with what Brian Thomas Jr. is and down with where Malik Nabers is, and just kind of swap their spots here. Look, we're getting into the weeds, might be, but that's what we do in fantasy football. We get who's going to be the better value, who's going to have that massive season. Malik Nabers is going to still have a very high floor, but I think the ceiling for Brian Thomas Jr. is a little bit higher, and there's multiple reasons for this. And you look at just the build of what he did last year, right? There's a lot of status quo with Malik Nabers, except the quarterback has changed. Here, the one thing that is the same is the quarterback in Trevor Lawrence, and the scheme and a lot of things have changed. Now, the biggest thing that has changed is the fact that Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk are not in this mix anymore. I mean, I know they were hurt, and that was part of the reason for his meteoric rise down the stretch, but they didn't bring them back. And a lot of their other receivers, like a Gabe Davis, are just like other field stretchers, right? So Brian Thomas Jr. doesn't have like a competition from a high volume slot or a tight end the way that Kirk or Ingram was, at least at this very moment. Now, they could use that first round pick. I doubt it on a wide receiver, and then we might, think twice about this. But I don't think the Jaguars are going to do that. It would seem silly to go back-to-back in drafts at wide receiver, especially when they have so many needs on defense and the offensive line. So I think Thomas is going to keep his role as a clear number one. With Nabers, I'm not sure. Will they bring in a Travis Hunter to cut into some of his work? Will they invest higher in another receiver? So there's a lot of things that are going to be in a negative space here for Nabers, even though the scheme hasn't changed. But you have Liam Cohen. Brian Thomas Jr. could easily get the Mike Evans treatment in this offense, where he's the go-to guy. He's scoring touchdowns. He's on the outside, making big plays, lining up wherever he wants all over the field. So I think Brian Thomas has just got more upside because, again, if we've seen Liam Cohen / Dave Canales, these quarterback whisperer types, that means Trevor Lawrence is going to have a big rebound season. And that means Brian Thomas Jr. can be trusted more with Lawrence than Nabers with Wilson or Winston.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up the targets. Brian Thomas Jr. saw a very respectable 133 targets. So we're not going to be too upset about that if that's all he gets again. But there's a lot of room there for growth. As you mentioned, they got rid of Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk. With Nabers, he already had 170 targets last year. You cannot get more than that. I mean, you can replicate it maybe, but there's really very little room to get more than that. Now you can hope for a little bit better targets possibly for Nabers, but Brian Thomas Jr., when he was going off, he was doing it with Mac Jones too. It's not like he was playing with some great quarterback either. So they both were dealing with rough quarterback situations, at least the second half of the year for Brian Thomas Jr. And there's just so much room for his targets to increase. And last year when we saw him get the targets in the games with 8+ targets, which was 9 games, a good chunk of them, he averaged 18 fantasy points per game. And on the season, he averaged 14. So there is a huge area there for him to improve. And I'm with you. I move up Brian Thomas Jr. I would rather him over an AJ Brown. I'd rather him over, what about Nico Collins or Brian Thomas Jr.? That's the tough one.
Yeah, that one is tough. I mean, based on the other receivers in Houston, I think that's a very comparable situation, right? I mean, they changed the offense in Houston. You still have CJ Stroud. You have Trevor Lawrence in this case. So I think it'd be close. But I think, again, Thomas might be just a better player and have better upside with his talent than Nico Collins. And that's saying a lot because Collins is already a very good player and he's fit really well with Stroud. So I don't know. Thomas, I might bang the table for it a little bit more to take significantly higher than where he is at wide receiver 8. I might take him more wide receiver 4 or 5 even. We can be kind of adventurous and risky, but the bottom line is if you draft an LSU receiver taken high in a draft, in your fantasy draft, you're going to be pretty happy. But again, if you want a little bit more juice and you want to feel a little bit more aggressive, I think Thomas over Nabers is the way to go.
Yep, I am with you. All right, let's take a quick break, and then we're going to discuss 2 players from the AFC West divisional opponents here. But They're both going high in drafts, and we have to figure out, are they worth it or not? That's Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey. We'll get it right into that right after a quick break. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivers incredible results. And posting a job is free and simple. And within a day, you can get multiple qualified candidates to choose from. So visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. All right, let's get into the next two players that are entering their second season that are the next highest ranked guys. And that's Brock Bowers coming right after Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas Jr. at 14 overall in consensus ranking. Tight end 1 off the board. He finished as the tight end 1 last year, tight end 2 in average points per game. The issue isn't his ranking at the tight end position, right? Like, I think we're perfectly fine with Brock Bowers being the first or second tight end off the board. The question is that ranking of being the 14th overall player or around there, you know, can you afford to use that pick on a tight end while he's risky going into a second season?
Yeah, that is really the question. And I think what you have to ask yourself is, what would I do if it was Travis Kelce? And you go back and maybe look at some past drafts and say, was he that much of a game changer? Are you going to get that much of an advantage versus the rest of the field at tight end to say, okay, we're really cooking here with gas where I have this big edge and I can kind of bridge the gap at other positions later, right? So that's really the question. And I say, in some respects, yes, that is something you can do. But again, we got to remember George Kittle was very high scoring, and Kittle could have a really big role here playing off what 49ers have because Debo's gone, and they might need a little bit more time for Ben Ayuk. So Kittle could easily have another big year that finishes above. So are you getting that much of an advantage over Kittle? Now, you might be getting an advantage over the rest, but Trey McBride, if he can score a few more touchdowns, the gap could be bridged here. You also have a Tyler Warren in this year's draft that could have a big impact on his team and have a big rookie year. You have Mark Andrews sitting out there. So there are a few guys that you can look at. So it comes down to, are you getting that much of an advantage from tight end 1 with Bowers for the next guy versus taking a receiver and then seeing a drop-off, or a running back and seeing a drop-off? So it is very close for me, but I'm going to say a little bit down for Brock Bowers because, again, this is an incredible finish here. From last year, I had some doubts on how he was going to be the number one target. Of course, the Devontae Adams trade kind of accelerated his value into what it was now. So I'm going to say it's a little too high for me overall. In terms of the tight end 1 ranking, I'm okay with that for sure. Like, there's no question. But I don't think he gives you that big of an advantage over George Kittle. The trade given Kittle was scoring more on average than he was. So, I mean, I think Kittle might be the better value right now than Brock Bowers when you're looking at tight end. He's definitely a tight end 1 possibility, but in a deep league, 14-team league, I'm not making him a first-round pick over some other options here.
Yeah, it will be hard to get Bowers on your team. You have to be super, super confident that he can produce not just what he did last year, but even more than that to take him that high. And I do think there's a reasonable explanation as to him being much better in his second season. Not much better, but even better than how he was as a rookie. He only had 5 receiving touchdowns. Like, there's definitely room to grow there. And they got Geno Smith, so they definitely upgraded the quarterback position. And last year, when Bowers got to play with Aiden O'Connell, that's when he shined. He averaged 14.6 points per game in those games with Aiden O'Connell last year. And then in the games with Desmond Ridder or Gardner Minshew, he averaged just 10 points per game. So massive gap just between the quarterbacks. So I do think with Geno Smith that he can take that next step. Now, What if he and Geno Smith, though, don't have that connection? That's the risk, too. We already know Brock Purdy and George Kittle have the connection. We know how many vacated targets are there right now with the 49ers. That's not the case with the Raiders. They could add, early in this draft, and, they still have Jacoby Myers, and we'll see if they run the ball more, too, because their running game was so bad last year. So those are all the worries. So I'm with you. I would move down Brock Bowers a couple of spots at least to feel better there. Now, another wide receiver going into his second year, Ladd McConkey. He's going 24th overall right now in consensus rankings. Wide receiver 11 off the board. He finished as the wide receiver 18 in fantasy points per game last season. I'm actually okay with this ranking. I think it's perfectly right. I don't want to move it up or down. I'm actually excited to see what McConkey can do in his second season.
Yeah, I guess we must be drinking from the same pot here, because I look at this and say the same thing. I was like, is this too high? I had to think about it for a while. Okay, he finished as the wide receiver 18, so this is popping him up 7 spots, but he was just so good down the stretch, and I don't really necessarily see the Chargers forcing the issue here to get another key target. I mean, are they going to just be satisfied with Tyler Conklin? I know they were attached to the tight ends, mainly Colson Loveland, because he went to Michigan, and that was there in play, but I don't know if they're going to use that early pick. Now, they could go get an Emeka Egbuka if he's available in the first round, or someone of that nature, or Luther Burden, someone to complement him, but they do have Quentin Johnson. They do have some other guys that they could look at, even though they haven't been all that productive and they're disappointing. So the question is that they use the second rounder McConkey. Do they want to go aggressive and use yet another pick? We figure they're also going to be a little bit more run oriented here with Najee Harris in the mix. They want to run the ball and pound it. But I think McConkey is one of those guys that just gets open all over the field, and he's versatile. I don't think he's just a slot guy. He can make some big plays. He can score. And I think you look at the second half of last season, I think it goes for Brian Thomas Jr. as well. Sometimes you look at that second half and you say, can this be sustainable? And we look with Bowers, there's McBride too, who also came on strong in the second half. So you look at all these players that came on strong in the second half. And McConkey, you saw the evolution. You saw the chemistry develop with Justin Herbert. We like this passing game to have a higher just punch overall. This offense just to be more explosive in general. I think it's going to be more balanced, more explosive. McConkey can stretch the field even when needed. So he's a complete receiver. And I think maybe he's just being overlooked because we're looking at Nabers and Thomas and they're flashy. But McConkey's also the isolated second-year go-to guy with a pretty good quarterback situation. So look, I want to say up, but again, it's already pretty aggressive, right? You move him up 7 spots into the top 12 at his position. So we're going just right for McConkey with this one as well.
Yeah, you can't move him up because he's already, it's getting there where it's a little scary with price.
Yeah,
but I do think right now it's fair and the right cost. From weeks 8 through 18, like you said, it took a second for him to get going. But the second half of the season, averaged 14.9 points per game. Wide receiver 11 during that span on average. That was more than Brian Thomas Jr. by very little, but still ahead of him, and a few spots ahead of Nabers as well. So for a major chunk of his rookie season, he was outperforming those guys. We have 2 more players to discuss. Jayden Daniels, quarterback going real early, but we don't like to take quarterbacks that early, but is Jayden Daniels worth it? And then Marvin Harrison Jr., who shockingly did not have the year we all expected him to have. So he is ranked lower right now than the other guys we discussed, but we will say if it's too high, too low, or just right.
All right, it is time to hear from another one of our sponsors here. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? That's right. Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe or sign in to the Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports, College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6, and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple. It's all on your Fire TV. You can expect the latest technology for elevated playing. There's smoother, more responsive gameplay, endless entertainment. You can also watch a ton of movies as well if you want to chill and do that when you're not gaming. more than 1.5 million there that you can check out on Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. It's affordable and portable gaming for you. You can play Xbox games as a fraction of a cost of a console. And if you have a console already, it's fine too, because the device is more affordable, a Fire TV Stick 4K, and easier to travel with, allowing you to take you or your kids' games wherever you plug in. Just check it out. It's great. I have a lot of kids who game, and this is a game changer for sure. When you're watching it in 4K and playing, you're just a lot more locked into your game, and you're going to be a lot more successful. So head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatibility controller are required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. All right, we're going to continue the theme of mostly LSU and all SEC players. We'll finally break it on our last guy here, but Jayden Daniels, we didn't bury him here. In the overall rankings, he's 30. No big deal, right? He's just a third rounder that we're looking at. He is QB3 on the board, which tells you who is he QB3 behind. We know the first two, Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen, whatever order you want him. So this is where he's ascended. He's flipped and jumped over the two guys that were in front of him, tied Joe Burrow and Baker Mayfield. So it makes a lot of sense because he's got the running cheat code. Those guys do not. So Jayden Daniels, Michelle, are you going up, down, or just right? And again, maybe we're looking at the overall versus where he's ranked at QB3.
Exactly. It's just like Brock Bowers, right? No issue with QB3 ranking. Is it too early to take Daniels 30th overall instead of a different position? And I think that's the question to be had, because I could totally see him finishing as a top 3 quarterback. I'm perfectly fine with that ranking. Even last year when he finished as a quarterback 5 on average as a rookie, there was 2 games in there that skewed that a bit because he barely played in those 2 games. But if you just take those out and just count the 15 games where he had at least 15 pass attempts, he averaged 23.1 points per game in those 15 games. That was more than what Josh Allen averaged last year. It would have only been behind Lamar Jackson. So I do think that Jayden Daniels is well worth the quarterback 3 ranking. If you want to go with Jalen Hurts instead, if the tush push is not banned, then that's fine. But 30th overall ranking, that's going around Mike Evans, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Christian McCaffrey, a little bit ahead of, Jalen Hurts and Sam Laporta, those guys. When I name that, right, what you're missing out on, I actually don't mind taking the star stud elite quarterback that's going to win you games week after week after week over those names I mentioned. So I actually don't mind this ranking at all. And I'd actually be willing to push him up a couple spots.
Yeah, a correction to earlier. The guy that's in front of him as well is Lamar Jackson with Josh Allen, and we have Hurts behind him. So that says he's going to jump Hurts as well in a lot of rankings, and there are some rankings where Daniels is behind all 3 of those guys. Now, I don't agree with that, but if there's someone who jump in to, I think Lamar definitely has a lot of appeal, the way he's now passing and running in a total groove with what's going on. So he's up there. Josh Allen, look, is a touchdown well going to dry up a little bit with him and Hurts at some point? Is that going to regress? It's hard to say, right? I mean, it just keeps coming. And you mentioned the tush push. Are they going to get enough rushing touchdowns from other players to bring that down? Because that's really the difference, right? When you look at those 2 guys versus Daniels. Now, Daniels could also see a spike in his own rushing production in the goal line area. So I think you look at that as well. So, and he could have scratched the surface of just his passing ability. He's got Debo now in there as well. So you figure his passing yards and production there are going to go up. I think I would say, look, you can be aggressive as number 2 QB on the board with him. You can definitely say he's QB3. But I'm going to say in terms of, I'm not going to take any quarterback at 30 overall. Not going to happen. 3rd round is a little bit too much. 4th round, I'm going to see what values you have there, especially when the difference, again, we're looking at the difference. It's not that big between him and Hurts right now. Or you say Joe Burrow behind him or anyone else that could rise. We like Caleb Williams. The value is just not there to take him in the middle of the 3rd round overall. But I do like, again, let's explain QB3 just right to me. The 30 is way too high. A little bit up, I would take him more in the fourth round, especially. So like 45 would be where I take him to 30.
Wow. Okay. So we differ there because I'm definitely perfectly fine taking him at 30. I'd be happy to grab him there. So that's finally one that we do not agree on. I kind of like it. But Marvin Harrison Jr. is the last guy we need to talk about, ranked 44th overall right now, wide receiver 20th off the board. He finished as the wide receiver 42 on average. So that's a huge jump up for him in these consensus rankings to have him at wide receiver 20 coming off the board, especially when there's not really any changes that happen to the Cardinals offense. You got the same play caller and Drew Pensing. You got the same quarterback and Kyler Murray. They didn't really change their weapons besides losing Greg Dortch. Like nothing's really changing here. And I guess it depends on how much growth Harrison can take, right? Because he really struggled with separation last year, only averaged 2 yards per target in separation. Worst among wide receivers by a really good chunk. So it's like, has he worked on getting open more? Because the scheme's not going to change to help him get open. Like unless Petzing completely changes up his offense. And what was the most shocking about Marvin Harrison last year is only the 116 targets in 17 games, right? We thought he could dominate targets in this offense, and it just wasn't happening. So do you think that wide receiver 20 ranking, 44th overall, is too high or too low or just right?
I think you have to say it's too high. I mean, this is just an incredible leap of faith that he's going to get that much better in 1 year. Like, let's just not get over aggressive here. And I think if his name was anything else, like Joe Receiver 40, we'd be like, okay, he's Joe Receiver 40. We're not going to go for it. But it's Marvin Harrison Jr. So then, like, oh, he's got to be as good as his dad. His dad had a year very similar to him in year one, and then he took off and exploded. But things don't always work out that way, right? I think it's just a little too aggressive, right? This is a lot. This is 22 spots. So you're basically saying he's going to be way up there and also just worth the value. Now, why do we have to be so aggressive? Why don't we just say wide receiver 30 and just like get there first, make him a viable starter? Because a couple things that concern me on top of what Michelle was talking about, the status quo of everything in Arizona, was a little bit touchdown dependent, right? A lot of those numbers came on touchdowns. And if you didn't have those, you were really looking at a shaky season for him overall. So I think he's got to get more consistent with the catch and yards part. I mean, right now, I would say Trey McBride is clearly remains the go-to guy on this team over Harrison. So look, let's get him into the late 20s even before we jump all the way to a surefire elite wide receiver 2. No, he hasn't shown us that yet. So take the name away from the player, look at the production, look at the situation, and you're going to say this is too high. So again, there was reason to bump up McConkey. There's not a lot of reason to bump up Harrison that much. So I'm going to say down, down, down from here to end my look at these receivers.
Yeah, it's hard to not say down. Like I'm not giving up on Marvin Harrison Jr. at all. Like he still has plenty of time to. We saw how amazing he was in college. Like he didn't. It can't be that bad in the NFL. Like I do expect him to be better, but if they would have just changed coordinators, we would have had some reason to believe. But like with no change at all, it's just too high to push him up. So I'm with you. He has to get moved down a little bit before I will be willing to take him. That is for sure. That is it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll talk to you on Monday. Bye, y'all.